you a believer in UFOs?
Yes, I do undoubtedly believe that we see things that are unidentified. What's concerning is they're swarming some of our warships. They're hovering in places where we're doing workups for operations and training and deployment. They're not going to the scenic places, it seems. So what they are is the big question, of course, and I don't claim to know. And I think we're going to find it's probably more than one operator behind this because we're seeing some very different and distinct kinds of aircraft, kinds of vehicles.
Why do you think they're here? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, it appears, perhaps not surprisingly, that I mean we know a lot of potential adversaries are interested in our military capabilities. We're the big guy on the block, and countries like Russia and China want to keep a very close tab on what we have and what we do and how we do it. What it seems to me is that somebody is conducting clandestine reconnaissance, and although in some cases, curiously, they've become more bold. And recently, in some of these cases, say in 2019, it's clear they wanted to be observed, and it seemed they were trying to provoke us to test our air defense capabilities, see how we react, what frequencies we emit on, all that kind of thing. So it's gotten a little more bold, a little more aggressive, a little more concerning.
Whenever I'm thinking of anything, if it's a crime or some political decision or whatever, international affairs, I always look at motive. Like, okay, this happened, but why would the person do that? I think motive is usually the best. When you get all these clues to some mystery, motive is, I think, usually the best thing. So why would somebody want to do this, like let themselves be seen? If you have this technology, you would think you have the technology to not be seen. And why is it all around? These are two different questions. And then they're all military related. Maybe it's just that the military has the radars and these things are other places, but the farmers in Iowa don't have radar systems to find them. So is it really, are they focused on our military? Are they focused on other nations' militaries? Or are we the only ones seeing it? Anyway, I'm asking you a lot of questions here, but these are
those are all great questions, and
yeah.
I can address those pretty succinctly, I think. In terms of motives, this is partly what's concerning because in the intel community, we'll do something we call ferreting. Sometimes we'll send, say a reconnaissance platform into an area to deliberately provoke the air defenses to see
right.
how they respond and what they're doing. And some of this behavior has that appearance, as though they're deliberately trying to test our responses and our capabilities. So that's a little concerning, but that's the only motive in some instances that it seems to make a lot of sense because they're being deliberately provocative and making sure that they're being seen and hanging, right near the ship and flying over the ship. And, it's very provocative in some cases, as opposed to the pattern over most of the past of these very elusive, rarely seen kind of fast moving objects. Some of these cases, it's very different. They're really hanging out where they can be seen as though they want to be seen. So we don't know what the motive is. That's one of the big questions. But to the extent that we can impute one based on the observed behavior, it's a little concerning because of what seems to be a focus and emphasis on our military capabilities and sensitive installations, largely nuclear installations, and platforms either with nuclear power and or nuclear weapons capability.
Well, everything you've told me is that we've been completely defenseless against these things. We can't even intercept them half the time. And when we do, now I have a note here, ROE. What if the F-16 intercepts it? What are the rules of engagement? Is it just like an observe, or the pilot's just going to, I don't think we're going to go shoot something down, right?
No, I don't think so. Not unless it's, making a beeline for the White House or something.
Right.
And that's an interesting question with regard, particularly to some of these drones, because they could easily open fire some of these Navy ships when these things are in close proximity, in which they have been. In some cases, just moving at 16 miles an hour parallel to the ship as it's underway at night. And there have been opportunities to engage. Thus far, to my knowledge, none of the commanders on the scene have chosen to do so or been allowed to do so.
Right. Maybe that's a good thing. Yeah.
This is a very popular notion among those interested in UAPs, that the level of demonstrated technology is so advanced that they've been spotted around the world for so long that surely by now, if they'd intended us any ill will, we'd have received it. But this is where I disagree. I'm not completely convinced that just because we haven't been provided a clear demonstration of force, that they are not capable of it and they don't intend it. Let's make an assumption for a moment. Anything further back than the 40s is not a UAP in the sense of how we understand them today. So we're talking about UAPs from the 40s to today. The first operational military jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262, a German aircraft, went into service in April of 1944. So UAPs, with all their super advanced technology, have only had to contend with 76 years or so of humans in the air with jet fighters. Yes, there were biplanes with guns going back to World War I, but let's just stick with jet fighters as we know them. 76 years, and we've made some serious jumps in technology from the 40s to today. Now, even the jets that documented the Tic Tac videos, the FA-18 Super Hornets, are not the latest and greatest in US jet fighters. We now have the F-22, the F-35, and whatever the folks at Skunk Works and beyond are making. My point is that we are a long way from the Messerschmitt 262, and perhaps those UAPs never felt threatened by our low-end technology. But as we make our technological jumps, what happens when we are no longer bringing a stick to a gunfight? What happens when we can reach out and touch that UAP, no matter how briefly and how little of an impact we could have? Does that change the nature of our interactions? Consider for a moment our current Predator UAVs, or drones, or whatever the proper nomenclature is. They are capable of carrying weapons, but they can also fly without them. If you're a bad guy, you might have been under the watchful eye of one of these aircraft. You might have even seen one of them, but they never did you harm until the day they did. That's my point, that we don't know what we don't know. And that could be a serious problem when we're talking about a UAP that's moving like the ones we've observed so far. Chris Mellon.
We don't know the intent. So we have to be cautious and prudent until we determine it. Let me point out, we were never attacked by the Soviet Union. We have not been attacked by the Chinese. That doesn't mean that we say, oh, gee, well, we don't care where they fly or what they do, right? There are good reasons for that. So I take a little comfort from what James has said and others have said that there haven't been blatant acts of aggression, but there have also, if you dig carefully into the record, been some things that were at least indifferent towards the safety of some of our personnel, and in other cases interfered with some of our systems, acts that could be considered acts of aggression, interfering with nuclear weapon systems even, which is hard to think of anything more alarming than that. There are also individuals both in our military and in other countries, civilians, and in some cases military personnel who have suffered injury. And so it's a bit of a clouded picture. Obviously, there hasn't been, some overt, blatant acts of aggression. But in 1952, the U.S. Capitol was overflown twice with a considerable number of these objects. Was that a message? Was that intended to deter? So I think, we can't rest on our. It's lazy and inadequate from a national security standpoint to just say, well, nobody's shot at us yet, therefore we don't have to worry or take any precautions. That's not what people at DoD get paid to do. It's rather concerning because a lot of the activity we see is in and around military facilities. And to some degree, that may be an artifact of, we're seeing the keys under the lamppost because that's where the light is brightest. But this recurring pattern off the East Coast, for example, week after week, month after month, in and around not civilian areas, but military target areas and restricted DoD airspace. That's the kind of activity that you would see in advance of potentially of some kind of intervention. Somebody, is this somebody who wants to really understand our military capabilities, our operating procedures, how we work up, range, distances, speeds, et cetera, or why else are they out there, dogging these operations? So I don't think we need to panic or anything, but I don't think we can just sit on our hands and say, oh, gee, they haven't done anything devastating in the past, therefore they never will in the future. We don't have to be concerned about it. What politician in their right mind wants to tell the American people, children, families, elderly people, you may not be safe. There may be an alien power that could wipe us out tomorrow and nothing I can do about it. Have a good day. I don't think you open that can of worms if you can't answer even simple, basic, fundamental questions that are going to spring to every reporter's mind immediately. Why don't you go there? You're going to stir everything up and not present a solution or a way ahead. You'd have to think that whole thing through, and then where you go with that, you'd probably have to coordinate with other world leaders. There's a lot of issues you'd have to think through, and I don't have any suggestion that anyone is working that or thinking about that or anywhere close to doing it.